Hi, Anand. Great to have you on the webinar.
Mohit, how are you doing? Looking good.
Thanks. Doing very well, and very excited to discuss with you, just different aspects of modern data security today. I thought I would, I've obviously known you for a while, but I want to make sure you have a really interesting backstory into getting to where you are at. It would be great for the audiences to hear it as well. Can you start from way back when you were with Gene Spafford at Purdue and bring us to where you are today, Anand?
Actually, I will go even more way back than that, Mohit. So I think everyone has a very interesting technology story, how they got into technology, right? My tech story is that, like when I was in fifth grade, sixth grade, something in that around that time frame. At that time, if you looked at the news articles about what is happening in technology, a lot of those news articles were about Cray research and how Cray supercomputers were being used to do weather data modeling or to do nuclear bomb simulations or to do some really hard computational work. And all of that sounded really fantastic to me. So I vowed to myself that I'm going to work on supercomputers one day, right? And so as things go over time, my interest cemented even more and more. And I did my bachelor's at one of the IITs in India. And then for my master's, I came to Purdue because Purdue had a really good computational science research center. And I wanted to fulfill my dream of working in supercomputers all along. But and I did get a chance to work on that. But I also got interested in the space of security because Professor Eugene Spafford, who is the founder of security as a discipline in the country, he had this amazing style of teaching and some great research that goes on in his lab. That as I looked into it, I thought to myself, man, this could be a very interesting career. And this is like long time ago. I won't date myself because I'm old. But this is long time ago. And at that point, security was not the biggest topic, but I could see the promise of that topic, right? So when I graduated from Purdue, I did go and work at research for 2 years. That was kind of my life's dream fulfilled.
Yeah.
And one of the posters that hangs in my office, the one that is blurred out, I wish I'd unblurred it. The poster that you see in my office, that's Cray T90. That is the most beautiful supercomputer made. It may not be the most powerful, but that's the most beautiful supercomputer ever made. So that's kind of my story. As I worked through my life and my career, I was a CISO at one of the subdivisions of United Health Group. I was the CISO that drew security for Target.com. Um, as I worked through my life story, I gravitated more and more in the cybersecurity space. The charm of cybersecurity, for some, it may be a lot of pressure, but the charm of cybersecurity for me is that it's a continuously changing field. And for someone like me who needs intensity and focus, that's an amazing field because it just keeps you engrossed. The kind of things that are happening, all the way from Stuxnet to the fact that you can get into utilities, to the fact that now um, connected toothbrushes can be used to conduct attacks on infrastructure, right? This is the world that we live in. So that's kind of my cybersecurity journey and a little bit of my life's tech journey. That's something about me. But Mohit, if you don't mind, I would love to hear the same from you since you put me on the spot
Yeah. Yeah.
there.
I mean, this was good. I thought it was really interesting from Cray to now, a different version of supercomputer. Now you're running big cloud organizations, slightly different configuration, but all big compute. For me, I think I latched onto the part where you said around, just you having really great teachers. You ran into Gene, and now you're in security for life. Just a story of a few great professors. One was in computer architecture. He got us really excited about both the software and introduction to computing and also introduction to Compark. Got into designing hardware, then met another great professor at UC Santa Barbara, super creative, super fun, just having felt like the time of his life the whole time. So got into security because that lets you be creative. I don't have to just go do the 40-stage pipeline all over again and tweak small things. You can design aircraft, grade secure computers, and now you have a clean slate. So that was great. And then for postdoc, again, architecture and security, we work with really great people who are not just productive, but they're like, hey, we'll build big long-term communities and industry around the work they were doing. So just this big long-term focus. And they were at Berkeley. Krista Sanovich, she founded RISC-V. Don Song seemingly founded half of security. And both are really great people. So that momentum just kept on going. So when I came to UT Austin, met with my ex-students, now colleagues, Kason and others at UT, we just kind of banded together and got to where we are. But under the hood, I think it was kind of a good confluence of what we can do, like technically engineering wise, and what we really care about, which is privacy and making sure that data flows and all these things are just a built-in part of our computing. So it was very lucky confluence.
Yeah, I'm surprised. The biggest surprise in all of what you told me, Mohit, was that you did research at UC Santa Barbara, because what I've heard is that all UC Santa Barbara guys do is hang out by the ocean and the beach.
That's true. That's true. The CS department is literally overlooking the beach. My favorite story there is they took the building plans from Princeton or somewhere. That's the apocryphal story. So there are like nooks for rain gear and all these things, and no windows overlooking the ocean. But yeah, it's a great place.
They wanted to keep you focused.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, this notion of this massive change from supercomputers to now cloud. I also thought it was really interesting that you've been in really regulated verticals where you have to construct not just least common denominator security stacks and processes and so on. You have to construct pretty high-end things so that you can get it all certified. I'm just wondering, how do you trace the evolution of data security in that regard? Because for me, it was a huge surprise, just frankly, coming out of academic research, that data security is a very different, unique subdiscipline.
So great question, Mohit. And I would like to compartmentalize data security in two pieces, right? One, I would say what is pre-cloud, and one, what I would say is post-cloud, right? So if you look, because I'm one of those people who have been fortunate enough to work in very large companies with their own data centers and data sources, and now I'm working for a fully cloud SaaS company, right? So if I look at the pre-cloud, the legacy construct of data security has focused on protecting data, mostly in structured databases, because that was what was the source of truth for all the data that enterprise has, right? So this included protection against unauthorized or unwanted access attempts. But that legacy construct had one major flaw in it. Typically, the protection and monitoring of those data sources, or understanding of those data sources, it required deployment of heavy agents or oppressive technology. What do I mean by oppressive? Like, think about this, right? You are deploying heavy agents or things that are doing heavy compute on the systems that are being used to service the needs of millions or billions of people in the country or the world, right? So first of all, just monitoring some of these highly transactional systems on an ongoing basis, that introduces a heavy drain on performance. And more often than not, what will happen is your DB admins will come and say, okay, guys, this is the small percentage of compute that is available to you. We are going to put you within that box, and you cannot exceed that box, because otherwise what you are doing is you are imperiling my production systems, and we cannot have that, right? And like, believe it or not, healthcare systems are some of the most transactional systems in the world, even more so than banking systems. Retail systems are extremely transactional. You cannot do deployments like that on systems like that, right? So your legacy data security tooling was built in that mode. Many people would do that deployment still because it's a requirement of regulations. They were all able to afford a little bit of protection, But what I mean by a little bit is it is only protecting your structured databases sitting in your data, number one. And number two, you have been neutered to such a degree that you are able to have only a small amount of insight rather than complete insight, right?
Right.
So that's the construct of the kind of your legacy data sources. Before I switch gears into my kind of what does the cloud data security mean in the cloud, I would love to get your take on the legacy side of it. Did what I tell resonate with you, or do you see some different aspects in your experiences so far?
That makes sense. I actually fully agree. On the product engineering side, right, like having these transactional databases, I mean, there are classic vendors in this space who've worked really hard to really optimize the agent. And one of the key things that seems to me is they are really targeting towards checking a compliance use case. Like, can I say that my accesses are monitored, right? Whereas when you go into a post-cloud scenario, you have to think more in terms of potentially MITRE attack, like attackers moving through the cloud and getting to one data store here and a different type of data store there and so on. So that's one axis. The other one I did want to ping or post point your or ask your advice on was, what about corporate environments? It also seems like old shared drives, SharePoint, these type of corporate environments with everyone putting different types of data. They're also getting exposed to now, let's go train a Copilot on it or generative AI models on it to boost productivity. So it seems to me that corporate environments are also now at the focus of data security and legacy.
Yeah, so I think that I'm gonna make it even bigger topic than that, right? I think AI is a major disruptor in data security, but if I look at the spectrum of data security now, it's not that limited anymore as what I described about quote unquote legacy scenarios, right? So the needs have changed. The needs have changed because in today's world, you have to focus on, I think you mentioned it, MITRE framework and how it can be used to kind of build a blanket of security around the data that you have. Of course, databases are still your primary data sources. But the other thing that has happened is, and I think you touched upon this briefly, is that data sprawl has become endemic, meaning that data is not just in your databases, it is also in your cloud buckets. It is also in your unstructured data sources like file systems and shared drives and Google Drive and Dropbox. And like there's so many sources of data sprawl at this point of time, right? To me, the organizations need to focus on being able to protect all of this, not just element of this, right? Because you don't understand, you cannot protect things. It's the basic concept of engineering. You cannot solve what you don't understand, right? So the first thing is you need to understand what is the sprawl of data in your enterprise. Where is the data? Who is accessing the data? You need to be able to map identity to data, because that's when you can figure out when there is anomalous access from identities to data, right? You need to map identities to data because that's how you figure out whether there is least privilege in the enterprise or not. For example, if your identities have never accessed the data source in last 1 year or 2 years, it's pretty obvious that they have been overprivileged, right? You should be able to subtract that privilege. So this is kind of your new construct of data security in the cloud-centric, SaaS-centric world that we live in today, which is understand everything about where your data is, right? Protect your data where it belongs, not just some data sources, right? Protect your data in such a way that it is scalable, meaning that you don't have those problems of the past where you have agent deployments on production systems which are killing your production systems, so you cannot protect effectively, right? So those are the use of APIs. All of those are the aspects that have significantly upended the world of security in cloud and in the SaaS model that we live in today. And for the same reasons, a lot of legacy technologies are not going to be applicable in the construct that we live in today, right?
That makes sense.
So I like the concept of data security posture management. I think it's a good concept, but I would say that even that is limited in the sense that data security needs to be more comprehensive than that. On-prem, cloud, all inclusive, single dashboard, ability to hone in into the problems, ability to detect anomalous activity, ability to understand, but also protect. My last comment on all of this before we jump into AI is that uh, a key flaw that many enterprises make is that they think of data security as a security item. Data security is a collaboration item among many entities in the organization. Specifically, the data scientists of the company, they benefit enormously from a data security tool because the data classification, the data mapping, the identification of data to like a PII or a PHI or things like that. That's worth its weight in gold for data scientists. So my strong belief is that data security is a critical piece of the puzzle for today's enterprises. It's an item that benefits infra, SRE, the data scientists, and security. That's the group, right? So that's why I think this a solution like this is extremely powerful, not just to protect the organizations, but to make organizations more agile, to become better at harvesting the data that they have, right? So
that's a fantastic point. It almost seems like in other constructs where it's just, hey, I have a secure container or I have a secure OS or a secure network device, you can almost slide it into the infra layer and not impact the rest of the org, whereas data seems like it's more intimate, and the data scientists and product teams have to be involved in kind of shepherding or still being great stewards of the data as opposed to secure the data. That's a great.
Absolutely. So Mohit, I'm going to flip the question that you asked me because I don't have a precise answer to that. So I'm going to just make it your problem now. Copilot is from all the articles that I'm reading in the news now, like AI is obviously the big thing now. Right? So I'm curious about whether in your experiences, are you seeing Copilot as a key use case? I would love your insights. You've been deployed in so many organizations. I'm sure you have some insights that I'm not privy to. So I would love your insights.
Oh, yeah, thanks. I think this is a really interesting point. Going back to your Gene Spafford point, there was this concept of a confused deputy in security. The simple idea is that, hey, there's someone working on your behalf, and if they assume all the privileges that you have, right, they can do a bunch of work, and then if you ask them to output on your behalf, they can do things that you didn't anticipate, right? Or if they take inputs from the outside, then they can even do things on your behalf that you didn't anticipate. Super simple concept. And I think under the hood with especially with something like Microsoft Copilot, it's your assistant, it's working on your behalf with access to all the data that you have. And each employee does this. So all the orgs that we see, they put stuff on shared drives, and no one goes poking around obsessively to find everything that they could get to, right? It's only like pen tests and such that reveal like, oh, hey, there's a shared salary folder where everyone can see. But now with Copilot, this is having like a really, really hyper intelligent agent that's going to push the limits of all the permissioning across on folders, corporate environments, et cetera, across your enterprise. So if you just say, if you're a lawyer and you say, hey, write this report in the format of my Coca-Cola report, you ensure that it's just a format that is being taken and not the content. I mean, everything that you have access to potentially gets through. So something
if I can add to that, right? Like I think that as a CISO, some of the things that worry me about, and by the way, I'm a huge proponent of kind of AI and the values that it can bring to many enterprises, right? So my guidance to anyone who will listen to me is that this is not something this is a force of nature. This is not something that you can stop from happening, right?
Yes.
What you have to figure out is what are the bounds within which it can happen and still deliver value to the enterprise, right? That's the way to tackle this problem.
Yes.
Two things that stand out for me, Mohit, is that first thing, do we understand what kind of data from your enterprise is flowing into the shared models, right? And are you okay with it, right? That's, I think, one
Yes.
key
Yeah.
piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
The second key piece of the puzzle is, um, are you able to uh, figure out when poisoning of these models is happening through the pumping of fake data, right? That's the whole thing now, right? Are you able to figure out when, if and when that poisoning has happened? Are you able to put some controls around it, right? So permissioning is an amazing point because you are granting a tremendous amount of privilege to Copilot associated identities. Those are the two additional items that I would put for
Yeah.
AI consideration in enterprises.
No, that's a great point. I mean, just as a tangible example to me is like, hey, if I have access to shared folders, I put a bunch of data in there that I want Copilot to pick up and use, and then for someone else's Copilot agent, their model produces the wrong output because
Yeah,
you poison the data in shared folders. So it's really cool. Like there's the confidentiality access attack, and then there's the integrity access attack where you kind of poison the model. So 100.
exactly.
At the heart of it all is just understanding like, hey, what data is in which type of folders and are you okay with it? The whole challenge is how do you do it at scale and how do you move the org forward while letting Copilot still be functional?
Yeah,
Yeah, so we've actually at Symmetry, we have launched Symmetry for Microsoft Copilot as a
awesome.
specific skin of the product that really helps people who are orgs who are trying to move and go fast. It just puts a seatbelt around your Copilot, essentially. It can
Yeah,
look.
that it's so amazing to hear that because um, one of the hesitations in not being able to use AI is not understanding how you can protect that exchange with these models, right? So I'm
Yeah.
glad that you guys are out with a tool that can provide some assurance to the enterprises who are looking for that extra piece of assurance before they jump full wagon, right? So
Right, right. And
that's great.
switching gears back towards the other thread that we were going, I mean, I wanted to also understand your take on, data security, as you just mentioned, got rapidly redefined from encryption and post-quantum and homomorphic to like, hey, just let's get a handle on access and usage, right? How should practitioners think of prioritizing this in their stack?
Yeah, I would say that there is a couple of things that are extremely critical to most enterprises, right? The first one is intellectual property. The second one is data. Those are the two things that, two assets that define enterprises in today's world. So, in my opinion, given that criticality, it has to be one of the highest priorities that any company has. I would say that unfortunately, it can also be an overlooked discipline. The reason why it is overlooked is because there is a lot of noise around other controls like edge controls, WAF or firewall or EDR controls. What have you deployed on your device, right? Obviously, all of those controls are important, and I'm not negating the criticality of that. But what will drive additional massive protection in your organization is for you to know what you need to protect.
Hmm.
And that's your data. Where is your data? Who is using that data? Two very important questions.
Yeah.
Typically not answered by the tools that I just mentioned. Your WAF or your firewall or your EDR is not telling you where is your data and who is your data, right? So there is that blind spot that many enterprises have that they need to overcome. That's absolutely crucial, in my opinion, and has the reason for prioritizing the discipline of data security within the enterprise.
Are there
As I
specific?
said before, sorry, just finishing out a closing thought here. As I
Yeah.
said before, uh, I don't think this should be practiced solo by the security team. In my
Hmm.
opinion, take partners across the enterprise because a data security platform not just improves the security of data, it also makes harvesting of data easier by your data scientists, and your SRE and others.
Yeah.
I lied. I'm going to share one more thought on this because this is an important one. Another reason why you want to understand where your data is because many enterprises are wasting a lot of money in the cloud data storage for
Mm,
data that is not being used at all. It's orphan data that is
mm,
sitting out there without practical usage. So there is a FinOps component to this, which you can take advantage of to make the business case for this
yeah.
with your finance partners to say, hey, if I have this platform, I will understand what I can eliminate that is useless, that is consuming resources in the cloud. Obviously, there's security benefit to it because that data, that thing is not getting care and feeding. But there's also finance benefit to it because by virtue of eliminating it from hot storage, you are probably saving a lot of money, right? So
That's a great point. And also the liability associated with all the data that you're holding on to is also something to consider.
yeah.
You mentioned something really interesting, like as the orgs who really think in terms of IP and who really think in terms of customer data or data they value, um, are there lessons or trends from the past in terms of which verticals should pay most attention to modern data security at the moment?
Yeah, I would say that the verticals that jump out for me right away are retail, healthcare, and health tech, and finance or FIs or fintech. Those
Mm,
are the verticals to me that contain a lot of sensitive information. And to me, um, there is definitely a need for a good data security platform in those organizations.
that makes sense. Um, Another theme that I'm thinking about is as someone thinks about, okay, I need to get a handle on data sprawl and the security use cases that you mentioned. Um, what should be the consideration? How could you kind of smoke test or kind of evaluate a data security product? This is indeed a very active space. Really great folks working in the space at the moment. So how should a practitioner sort of sort through and figure out, hey, here's the key things to look for?
Yeah. So I think some of the key things that I would call out are uh, the feature set of the product. It should be able to fingerprint the data sprawl in your enterprise. It should be able to do identity mapping with the data. And it should be able to tell you the usage patterns of that data.
Hmm.
So to me, that's number one of the core feature set.
Mhm.
The part two of the core feature set is the presentation of the findings or results, meaning that I don't want to look at like most security organizations already drown under the load of false positives or information that does not make a difference. So what happens in a scenario like that is you start to think about how do I optimize my time? And one way to optimize your time is to not use the tools that are giving you too much nonsense data, right?
Mhm.
So the quality of the data output and its presentation and prioritization of what is being presented to you from perhaps highest risk to lowest risk or maximum importance to minimum importance, that intelligent presentation of that data
Mhm.
makes a ton of difference because it empowers the organization to
Yeah,
go take real concrete steps
yeah,
rather than just collect data or information that you're not doing anything, right?
right.
So to me, that's the second key factor.
Yeah.
The third key factor that I would say is um, what is the usability of the platform?
Mhm.
Uh, the fact is that uh, we don't live in a world today anymore where you could train someone for 1 year to be a firewall engineer and then they can gingerly start to handle firewalls after that.
Yeah.
Nowadays, technology is moving at such a fast pace that it's almost an expectation that any platform that you are deploying in your enterprise, it has it is very good from a usability perspective, meaning that people can onboard it and figure out 90% of the stuff without having to go through training for 6 months.
Yeah.
Right. So to me, the usability of the platform is the third critical factor that I would put into play. The classification of data, and that would be kind of my fourth critical factor. So this, I mean, obviously there's a lot of, you can build a large list like that.
Yeah.
But to me, these four things stand out right away.
This makes sense. I mean, I fully agree. I think the most interesting, like one thing I would like to call out from what you said is there's the data classification and sprawl mapping phase, there's the identity phase and the operations, right? At least what we have found is there's no magic trick that will just magically make the data classification problem that's been around for 50 years just disappear. But the second point that you said, like prioritizing risk, using who can access it, the identity mapping, the permissioning, and the entitlements, right? And then how is it being used? Bringing all of these to put a risk map on top of the classification, that's what makes actionable feedback happen. So I fully agree with what you're saying. Another interesting theme for me is um, uh, there is a question really around, there are three kind of streams that are now feeding into one, data security, comprehensive data security theme, right? There are cloud security companies that were typically cloud workload vulnerability. They're like, hey, we should do cloud data security. There are old school data classification and privacy front end type companies who are also saying, hey, we should do, right? And then there's the legacy vendors who used to look at corporate environments or transactional environments. They'll say, hey, like we will reinvent ourselves. So how do you see this space playing out? Is this kind of more of the same from the past, or is this like a feature set? Or is there a space for more comprehensive?
So the way I'm looking at this, and I have a limited answer because some of this is still playing out, so the jury is not out yet. The only commentary that I can make with some precision is that the legacy players, they will need, their legacy platforms are not well suited for the needs of today's world. So the only way they can find some salvation is either by going back to the drawing board and creating a product that does what the cloud-centric world of the world today needs, right? Or that they are going to go and maybe perhaps short circuit that time period by acquiring a company that does modern data security for a living, right? That's the only outcome that I can see for the legacy player. As far as the rest of it, CSPM companies marching into this space or privacy companies marching into this space, I would say like privacy companies will have a real hard time with it because privacy is looking at data from a different lens, and one trusts of the world are already doing that. I don't think there is something major new that they can do without embedding themselves into deep tech. So I think they have a lesser chance. I would say your CSPM companies are probably the ones that will probably uh, uh, get closest, meaning because their operating model is the same. They, in terms of like what is the raw data that I need to look at to generate the kind of insights that are needed. And so as a part of CSPM, they have some of that raw data access. So it's a matter of building the engine on top.
That makes sense. I think one really interesting analogy, at least for the Azure cloud environment that I see is, hey, look, there's people trying to make purview type applications be the home of data governance where other business function can spec out what they want, how they want it, right? Regulations, etc., can be specced out. Then on the other side of it, there is Sentinel, something like this, that's like a security platform that gets alerts. But you need something in the middle to go map out how things go, how how the data flows work across the org.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
makes sense.
I am trying to anchor for data to be its own asset category, but it's interesting how this can
Yeah.
happen. Another theme I wanted to is point out, this is kind of entering into the fun zone, is, Anand, you also are a core member of an active participant in really fun communities. I know in Dallas, in your hometown, there's CISO XC. That's really fun and vigorous. You also work with either iANTS or SANS as a community member or instructor even. Just kind of your take on how has it been, like, what do you look for in terms of producing impact as you work in these communities?
Yeah, so I think the 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 first thing that I would say is that the CISO communities are extremely supportive of each other because it's a hard problem, hard job, tons of challenges, and obviously we do our best with the resources that we have. But one of the reasons why many people are able to do great in this profession is because they have this amazing support network around them. So one advice for like emerging CISOs or people who have that as a dream job in the future is to build that very strong network and foundation around you, because I can guarantee you, if you have a big collection of cohort of or a network around you, the problems that you are facing or the what you're trying to solve, someone else in your core group, in that larger group, has seen it already, and you can, if you know the right set of folks, they can help short circuit your journey, which may be full of hardship, to something that is considerably easier than that. So that's kind of my one very strong recommendation. The second thing I would say is that a lot of people in this space have a desire to make a difference. So, for example, I like to teach young kids about how to stay safe online, and I think perhaps it's a topic for another day, but the online practices are very unsafe in vast majority of the kids and the teens and people who are constantly on the internet. So I try to do my part to make that community safer. And I'm sure that, and I know that my other colleagues have similar passions as well, where they have a very strong desire to make a difference in the lives of people that are around them in some way, shape, or form. So that kind of collegial culture, that very strong desire to give back to the community is hardwired in the CISO communities and in the forums that I'm a part of. And I would say it's not that people do this because they feel that it's their duty, not just that their ability, but it's their duty to make that difference.
It has been great to learn kind of your arc coming in and your lens on outcomes that one could provide. I was curious to see, like, if you were to summarize the core crux of your message as one final takeaway, what would that be?
Yeah, I think the maybe I would throw out like maybe 3 or 4 key bullet points here, right? Prioritize data security as one of the most important security controls in your enterprise. You need to understand where your data is, who is accessing that data, where the overprivilege is, what does the data sprawl in your enterprise looks like, classification of that data, protection of that data. The second thing I would say is take partners across the enterprise. Finance can be a great partner to you, because if you know where is the useless data stored in your enterprise, you can eliminate it and save some money that way. And cloud costs are a big thing for enterprises these days. You can take data scientists as your partners. You can take SRE as your partners. So your chances of success skyrocket when you have these entities as partners, right? The third thing I would say is that as you think about the space of data security, you also need to think about what is the impact of bringing a new product in the enterprise. And consequently, it's important to understand usability. It's important to make sure that your data security platform is able to do good prioritization, that it is able to give you data that can be used for protection of your assets, right? So those are my 3 core messages. A horizontal message that I would put on top of the three verticals that I just mentioned is that um, the construct of data security has changed significantly. The modern cloud SaaS data security centric model is what is needed. And I think you need to look for things that can service both your current needs and if you have on-prem deployment, some of your on-prem needs as well. So I think that will give you a complete blanket on all of your data rather than just pieces of your data. So that's kind of my key takeaways from the conversation today.
That makes sense. Awesome. Thank you so much. I mean, my one sentence summary would be something we talked about earlier, which is, AI is an unstoppable force. It's amazing. As you deploy it, it's going to flush out all these gaps, exact gaps that you mentioned.
Yeah.
And it would be great to consider putting seatbelts around it and, stay safe while you drive fast. So that's
absolutely. Yeah.
Right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Anand. We really appreciate the time that you shared with us and hopefully with the community as well. So we really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohit. It was great talking with you.